Welcome to AlphaMotive Talks, the home of powerful words that move your mind and fuel your future. If you're ready to level up mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, you're in the right place. Every single action you take, every choice you make, and every path you walk is built upon the foundation of a single, powerful thought. Not just any thought, but the core thought. The one belief about yourself that sits quietly beneath the surface, shaping your self-image, your behavior, and ultimately your life. It's not the loudest voice, not the one you share with friends, not even the one you hear when you're pumped up with motivation. It's the quiet voice that comes out when the noise fades, when you're alone, when you fail, when you fall. And for most people, that core thought is broken. It often begins early. You try something and you don't succeed. Someone criticizes you. You get rejected. Maybe not just once, but again and again. Over time, a seed is planted, a thought. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I don't belong. Maybe I'll never make it. That thought takes root. It doesn't scream, it whispers. But it whispers every day. And over time, that whisper turns into your truth. Not because it is true, but because you believe it is. And when you believe it, you start living as if it's real. You might have dreams of being more, doing more, living a life that lights you up. But you don't act. Not because you don't want to, but because deep down your thought says, why try? You're not good enough anyway. So you shrink, you settle, you stay safe. You protect yourself from the pain of failure, but you also lock yourself out of the joy of growth. All because of one thought. What you need to understand is this: your brain is always looking for evidence to prove your core belief true. If your core belief is that you're not worthy, then even success will feel like a fluke. You'll sabotage it, dismiss it, or find a way to explain it away. If someone compliments you, you'll brush it off. If an opportunity shows up, you'll hesitate. Why? Because your brain doesn't want to break the story. It wants to stay consistent, even if the story is destroying you. Thoughts are not just mental events. They are creative forces. They build patterns. They create habits. And over time, they become your personality, your attitude, your lifestyle. You don't just think your life into being, you believe it into being. If the belief is broken, life begins to crack. Not because of outside circumstances, but because of internal limits. The way you view yourself sets the ceiling on your life. You can't outperform your self-image. If you see yourself as small, you won't chase big dreams. If you think you're incapable, you won't take risks. If you believe you don't deserve happiness, you'll push it away every time it gets close. Not because the world is against you, but because your thoughts are. Let me be clear, you were not born thinking you're not enough. That thought was planted by pain, by people, by comparison, by failure. But the truth is this: just because a thought was planted doesn't mean it has to grow. And just because it's grown doesn't mean you can't uproot it. That's the power you have. That's the shift that transforms your entire life. Not by changing the world outside you, but by changing the world inside you. Imagine for a moment that your mind is a projector. Whatever thought plays in your head, your life becomes the screen. If you run a story of defeat, you'll live a life of fear. If you run a story of limitation, you'll live a life of regret. But if you begin to project a new story, a new belief, a new thought, you change the picture. You change your energy. You change your confidence. You change your habits. And that change compounds. Thought by thought, day by day, it transforms you. You don't need a new job, a new relationship, or a new location to begin again. You need a new thought, a new belief. One that aligns with who you truly are, not who the world told you to be. Because at your core, beyond the doubt and the fear, there is something deeper. There is clarity. There is strength. There is truth. That truth says you are not broken. You are becoming. You are not behind. You are building. You are not stuck. You are learning. And as long as you keep holding on to the thought that you are unworthy, you will continue to reject the very life that's waiting for you. That's the cost of a broken core thought. It doesn't just keep you small, it blinds you to what's possible. Think about it: how many people live their entire lives never knowing what they're capable of? not because they lack potential, but because they never fixed the thought that said they didn't have any. How many dreams die not in failure, but in fear, not in action, but in hesitation? And all of it points back to one internal script. I can't. I'm not enough. It's too late. Who am I to try? These thoughts aren't truths. They're limits. And every limit you believe becomes a prison you live in. But here's the beautiful part. Just as one thought can trap you, one new thought can set you free. What if instead of saying, I'm not enough, you said, I'm learning every day? What if instead of thinking, I always fail, you thought, every setback is shaping me? What if you stopped letting your mind bully your future with beliefs from your past? The real change begins not when the world sees you differently, but when you see yourself differently. And that happens the moment you stop identifying with your pain and start identifying with your power. You're not just a person who's been hurt. You're a person who's healing. You're not just a person who's struggled. You're a person who's surviving. And more than that, you're rising. There is something sacred about self-belief. It's not arrogance, it's not ego. It's alignment. It's saying I may not be there yet, but I'm on the way. I may not have all the answers, but I refuse to doubt my ability to find them. I may fall, but I will never forget that I was built to rise. That's what happens when you fix that one thought. Your energy changes. Your posture changes. Your vision expands. You begin to take steps that once terrified you. You begin to show up fully. You begin to speak with clarity, to act with purpose, to live with conviction. That's the power of thought. And when you fix the root, everything connected to it starts to heal. Confidence grows. Relationships improve. Opportunities show up, not because the world suddenly changes, but because your energy finally matches what you've always deserved. So ask yourself honestly, what's the one thought that's been limiting me? What belief have I been carrying that no longer serves me? And more importantly, what truth do I need to replace it with? Because here's the truth: you were never meant to live small. You were never meant to question your worth. You were never meant to dim your light for a world that told you to stay quiet. You were meant to shine, to grow, to lead, to love, to live a life that reflects the truth of who you really are. But it starts within, with the one thought that sets the tone for everything. Fix that thought and watch your life begin to shift in ways you never imagined. Not because life got easier, but because you got clearer. You started believing again. You stopped surviving and started thriving. And it all began with a decision to stop letting the past define your value and to start letting your future define your focus. You don't need more motivation. You need clarity. You need to be reminded of your worth, not in a shallow, feel-good way, but in a deep, unshakable truth. You were born with value. You were born with purpose. And the only thing standing between where you are and where you could be is the story you keep telling yourself. Change the story. Change the thought, and the rest will follow. Always. Because the next battle doesn't begin with circumstances. It erupts within quiet conversations no one hears. Inside your own skull, a theater runs nonstop, and its loudest actor is self-doubt dressed as logic. It doesn't storm in with rage, it taps softly, calmly. Play it safe. Don't look foolish. Remember last time? These lines don't scream, they whisper strategically, wearing masks of caution, experience, and sometimes even humility. That inner critic isn't just vocal, it's rehearsed. It's studied your history. It knows which phrases disarm your courage, which moments you'd rather forget, and it uses them as ammunition against your progress. It doesn't need to be loud because it's consistent. Its reliability is its strength. And over time, consistency becomes belief. Belief becomes identity, and identity becomes destiny. No outside enemy ever harmed your destiny like unchecked inner narratives. The cruelest damage isn't the words people say. It's the echoes you adopt. One harsh remark at 16 becomes the filter you view challenges through at 40. One failure in school becomes the reason you don't apply for leadership decades later. It's not the world placing limits. It's your own looping dialogue reinforcing them. The danger lies in how rational these voices can sound. They pretend to be protectors, shielding you from embarrassment, keeping you away from loss. But protection without progress becomes paralysis. What begins as emotional safety becomes mental imprisonment. Over time, you stop dreaming, not because you don't care, but because your internal scripts convinced you it's pointless. So you go through motions, perform tasks, meet expectations, but never initiate bold action. Because that quiet inner commentary always arrives at the moment of decision. You'll mess it up again. You're too far behind. Others are better. These aren't neutral thoughts. They're lethal. Not in the physical sense, but in what they kill: ambition, creativity, resilience. If you ever wonder why some people with fewer resources surpass those with all the tools, it's not randomness, it's inner dialogue. The person who constantly hears, "Keep going," inside will outrun someone who hears, "Don't even try," every single time. Even if the latter has more experience, more talent, more education, their ceiling isn't external, it's psychological. What makes this more dangerous is how familiar the negative voice becomes. You live with it for years. It sounds like you. It mimics your tone. It uses memories, your insecurities, your past. But just because it sounds like you doesn't mean it belongs to you. It's borrowed from experiences that hurt. It's assembled from comments made by people projecting their own fears. It's shaped by comparison, rejection, and isolation. But it is not your truth. And yet you rehearse it daily. Not out loud, but silently. When you avoid taking risks, when you hesitate to express, when you agree to less than you deserve. These aren't choices. They're symptoms of inner manipulation. That quiet monologue convinces you that settling is wisdom. But there's nothing wise about staying stuck. The first time you feel that resistance, you ignore it. The fifth time, you question it. But the 50th time, it becomes your compass. You start obeying fear like it's your leader. You give it the keys to your ambition, and it parks your life in a corner called almost. Almost started. Almost reached out. Almost became. The tragedy isn't that people fail. The real heartbreak is when they never try because they're bullied by an invisible voice that no one else hears. The world sees their smile. They don't see the storm behind it. They see their achievements. They don't realize how many ideas were abandoned before they were ever born. Some call it imposter syndrome. Others label it insecurity. But it's deeper than that. It's a false identity constructed through repetition. And repetition creates rhythm, rhythm becomes routine, and routine creates your entire experience of reality. Once your internal soundtrack is composed of hesitation, the melody of your life plays out in the key of regret. There's a kind of mental self-sabotage that's so sneaky, it wears professionalism as camouflage. You say, "I'm not ready." You say, "Let me think more." You say, "After I improve a bit." But what you really mean is, "My thoughts told me I'm not worthy yet." And the saddest part, most people believe that forever. Here's the truth. Thoughts aren't always correct just because they're familiar. And silence doesn't mean peace if it's filled with suppression. That quiet voice you listen to, it has no authority, you don't grant it. Every time you obey it, you strengthen it. Every time you agree with it, you empower it. And every time you challenge it, you weaken it. You must learn to interrupt it. Interruption is how new scripts begin. Even if your new narrative doesn't feel natural yet, say it anyway. Even if it sounds like fiction, write it anyway. Because authenticity isn't about what feels true now. It's about aligning with what will liberate you tomorrow. Stop waiting for perfect confidence. That voice won't disappear first. It must be overridden through action. You don't outthink it. You outmove it. You override fear with decisions. You override shame with expression. You override hesitation with movement. Momentum doesn't wait for approval from your thoughts. It forces those thoughts to adapt. You're not going to wake up one morning and suddenly feel ready. You're going to wake up and decide readiness is a lie created by your comfort zone. You'll act even with shaking hands. You'll speak even with trembling voice. Because power isn't the absence of nerves, it's the presence of conviction despite them. Every person you admire, every success story you follow, they didn't escape self-doubt, they mastered it. not by eliminating it, but by refusing to surrender to it. They made decisions while scared. They moved forward while uncertain. They refused to let mental noise mute their vision. You must treat your inner dialogue like an employee, not a master. Let it report to you, not rule you. Audit it regularly. Fire the voices that insult your growth. Promote the ones that reinforce your courage. And build new language inside your own mind, even if the world outside still doubts you. This isn't just mindset, it's mental warfare. And your greatest opponent isn't external. It's the thought that plays on repeat without permission. The monologue that questions your right to change. You must confront it boldly, directly. Call it out. Starve it of attention. Drown it in action. Speak new patterns daily. Rewrite phrases hourly. Flood your thoughts with truths, not feelings. You don't feel powerful. Remind yourself feelings don't dictate outcomes. Decisions do. Say what you need to hear even if your brain argues. Speak it until your cells believe it. Until your nervous system stabilizes around new beliefs. Until that inner critic gets drowned out by a stronger, truer voice. That voice already lives within you. It's been there, buried under years of survival. It's the voice that cheered when you overcame heartbreak. The one that whispered, "Keep going," when no one believed in you. That inner alley may be quiet, but it's real. And every time you give it breath, your old scripts lose power. This isn't just about positivity. It's about mental clarity. You're not looking for cute quotes. You're building a new internal language system, one that doesn't run on fear loops, but on strength cycles. You're training your inner world to stop recycling old trauma and start creating new triumphs. Words matter, especially the ones you say to yourself. If your internal language is polluted, your external life becomes cloudy. You can't pour clean water from a toxic filter. You must detox your narrative, daily, intentionally, ruthlessly. And remember this, the inner voice you challenge may fight back. But that's proof it's losing ground. Comfort screams when it's dying. Resistance spikes when transformation begins. If your thoughts are getting louder, it means you're finally pushing them out of power. This is your moment to flip the script. No more nodding to lies. No more dancing with hesitation. No more negotiating with mediocrity in your mind. Decide. Today, you're done being narrated by fear. You're choosing truth, not because it's easy, but because you're done settling. Because you're building something, a stronger self, a clearer vision, a deeper purpose, and none of it survives if the voice inside keeps whispering defeat. So you silence it with bold action. You replace it with clarity. You rise, not when you feel like it, but when you decide your future deserves better than your fears. This is AlphaMotive Talks. The shift starts now. Because this time, you aren't just changing your inner sound. You're shifting the root of what drives you forward when nothing seems certain. The real difference between those who rise and those who remain isn't ability. It's how firmly they trust in unseen progress. It's how deeply they commit to pushing beyond appearances and into results that begin with belief. There's a quiet force more powerful than education, louder than applause, and stronger than luck. It's conviction. Not a loud, arrogant kind of certainty, but a steady, anchored kind of knowing. The kind that holds firm when everything else shakes. The kind that doesn't crumble when plans fall through or when circumstances grow wild. The kind that says, even if the road isn't clear, I am. Someone without that energy can be surrounded by opportunity and still feel invisible. Someone with that depth can walk through rejection and remain focused. What fuels that type of focus? It isn't natural talent. It isn't popularity. It's commitment to a vision they've seen inside, even if no one else sees it yet. And what creates that commitment? A decision. One that says, I'll back myself regardless of who else does. There's something magnetic about someone who believes in what they're building. You can sense it before they speak. It's in how they move. It's in the quiet resolve behind their efforts. You don't have to convince them to keep showing up. They aren't chasing permission. They're living purpose. People spend their entire lives waiting for circumstances to grant them access to confidence. But confidence isn't found, it's forged. It's constructed brick by brick through every moment you refuse to give in to hesitation. Each time you show up without guarantee, another layer is formed. Each time you pursue something uncertain, your mindset grows sharper. Confidence becomes a pattern, not a personality trait. It's not reserved for the outgoing or the loud. It's not something gifted, it's earned. And how is it earned? Through choosing to act, even in doubt. Through choosing to believe, even in silence. Through choosing to go again, even after hearing no repeatedly. This choice isn't emotional, it's foundational. What you repeatedly tell yourself when no one is listening becomes what you rely on when pressure rises. If you've been telling yourself, maybe later, or this probably won't work, then under stress, that's exactly where you'll fold. But if you've trained yourself to respond with, I'll adjust, or this is part of growth, you'll pivot instead of panic. It's not about having flawless execution. It's about having resilient patterns. You can recover from a misstep, but it's harder to recover from a weak internal compass. That's why the strongest people don't always have the most success early. They have the deepest roots later. They've failed more, not less. They've been told, you're not ready, and responded with action, not apology. The fastest path to momentum isn't waiting for inspiration. It's following discipline until inspiration returns. It's acting in alignment with where you're going, even if the current environment doesn't reflect that yet. True growth means trusting the blueprint, even when the building hasn't taken shape. You don't need a miracle. You need consistency. You don't need a perfect plan. You need faith in motion. And you don't need constant reassurance. You need clarity around what you're becoming. That vision you carry, that future version of yourself, it doesn't appear when things are easy. It becomes visible when you walk toward it without turning around every few steps to ask, is this working? When people chase things outside of them, validation, status, applause, they lose the ability to self-correct. Because when storms come, and they always do, those external things vanish. The crowd disappears. The hype dies down. And what you're left with is your foundation. If that foundation is built on fragile reinforcement from others, it collapses. But if it's built on conviction, it survives anything. What you must understand is that progress is rarely visible while it's happening. It's disguised as repetition. It feels like effort. It looks like normal days stacked together with intention. But somewhere along the line, you look back and realize you're no longer where you started. You're no longer who you were. You didn't feel the exact moment it happened, but it happened anyway. People don't break through because of one giant leap. They do it by trusting the process enough to stay the course when nothing exciting is happening. That's the part no one posts about. The long seasons of showing up without feedback. The stretch of time where the only reward is integrity. That's where the next version of you is built. Every outcome you admire came from someone's decision to keep choosing alignment over impulse, to keep investing energy into something with no instant reward. That's not easy. It requires maturity. And maturity is when you start doing things not because they feel good, but because they create who you're becoming. And here's the deeper truth. No one can give you that kind of self-trust. You must build it. How? By honoring small promises, by following through on things that don't offer instant gratification, by treating your goals like they matter before they pay you back. That is how internal loyalty grows. If you only work hard when things are exciting, your growth will be shallow. If you only stay consistent when people cheer for you, your momentum will die with their silence. But if you continue regardless of recognition, now you're operating from purpose, not performance. That's unshakable. People who live from that space don't need loud motivation. They've developed internal alignment. They move from a place of identity, not emotion. Their actions aren't tied to how they feel. They're connected to who they are. And that's where true stability begins. The real measure of strength isn't whether you crush every goal. It's whether you continue despite detours, whether you remain consistent when things break, whether you keep pursuing better without needing perfection. Because improvement isn't linear, It's layered, and every layer adds depth, not just surface. You can have all the intelligence in the world. You can memorize strategies, quote experts, master tactics. But if you haven't strengthened your commitment to growth regardless of results, you'll quit the moment the road gets bumpy. Not because you weren't capable, but because you hadn't trained your focus to outlast frustration. And here's the hard part. No one's going to beg you to stay the course. Most won't even notice when you go quiet. That's why inner resolve matters more than outer encouragement. This isn't about dramatics, it's about consistency, quiet persistence, daily effort. That's the path that outlasts talent and outperforms intensity. Intensity burns bright, then fades. Discipline burns steady and endures. You don't need to explode onto the scene. You need to build a fire that doesn't go out. And the spark comes not from hype, but from clarity. Clarity on why this matters. Clarity on who you refuse to stay stuck as. Clarity on what happens if you don't keep evolving. This isn't about being fearless. It's about being committed despite fear. You can feel every ounce of uncertainty and still move forward. That's what separates those who wish from those who win. The latter don't need everything to make sense before they begin. They start with the tools they have, then build stronger ones along the way. Because transformation isn't given, it's grown. It's born in the days no one claps for you. It's shaped in the hours you question everything. It's forged when you realize the journey is long, but the cost of staying the same is longer. That realization is enough to keep building, even without a perfect map. When you operate from a deep inner why, your external conditions become less powerful. Your fuel isn't praise, it's purpose. Your push isn't pressure, it's progress. You don't look for signs that you're good enough. You live like you already are. And eventually, things begin to shift. Not all at once, but steadily. People begin noticing your energy. Doors begin opening, not because luck found you, but because you created alignment. And alignment always attracts acceleration. But even if it didn't, even if no one noticed, even if no door opened, you'd keep going. Why? Because now it's personal. Now it's not about being seen, it's about becoming. And becoming is the greatest reward of all. Because once you fully embrace that becoming is the highest gain, the question shifts from, when will I get there? To how can I reinforce who I am every day? That shift rewires every morning, every effort, every decision. You're no longer operating from pressure. You're moving with purpose that no longer begs for proof. Old assumptions don't just vanish, they must be challenged directly. You can't improve your journey by simply running faster. You have to carry lighter beliefs. This isn't about removing every obstacle. It's about releasing the anchor that's been disguised as logic. For so many, the obstacle isn't around them. It's encoded inside habitual language. What dominates your focus eventually dictates your direction. Recurring phrases buried beneath awareness quietly steer you. I always mess up. I can't handle stress. I never follow through. These phrases seem harmless at first. They arrive cloaked in humor, modesty, or false realism. But repetition makes them sacred in your mind, even if they're destructive. What begins as observation morphs into identity. I failed that task turns into, I'm a failure. That plan didn't work becomes, nothing ever works for me. The human mind isn't just listening. It's recording, organizing, classifying, and eventually it starts acting out the pattern stored there, because what's repeated gets treated as fact. Now here's the most dangerous part. These internal sentences often go unexamined. You hear them daily, but because they're so familiar, you stop questioning them. You adopt them. You reference them. You live under their influence like they're written in stone. But they're not. They're graffiti, etched by discouragement, pressure, and past wounds. That's where the transformation begins, not in changing your environment, but in auditing your vocabulary. Internal speech is not just a mirror, it's a mold. Every sentence builds neurological wiring that strengthens automatic reactions. That's why just changing habits won't sustain growth unless you alter the mental script running underneath. If you repeatedly tell yourself you're chaotic, disorganized, or unlucky, Your behavior will fall in line, not because it's true, but because your mind craves consistency. It will seek actions that reinforce the dominant internal label. Even if it hurts your progress, your brain would rather feel familiar than evolve. The path forward isn't pretending you're flawless. It's replacing recycled limitation with language that empowers correction, resilience, expansion. Instead of, "I ruin things," say, "I'm navigating better ways." Replace, "I'm always behind," with, "I'm aligning in my timing." These aren't lies. They're strategic rewrites. They're not about delusion. They're about designing a mental space where growth is welcomed, not blocked. This is mental craftsmanship. And just like building anything durable, it takes intention. You don't build a new framework through inspiration alone. You forge it through consistency, even when the old sentences scream louder. The most toxic internal phrases don't go away quietly. They'll fight for their position. But each time you answer with upgraded words, you reclaim authorship. You're not here to echo trauma. You're here to create transformation. That requires deliberate vocabulary. Internally first, externally second. Too many people try changing outcomes while still repeating old programming. That's like painting over cracked glass and hoping it holds. The structure must be reinforced, not disguised. New declarations feel foreign in the beginning. That's natural. You've spent years rehearsing insecurity. You won't immediately feel at home in empowerment. But emotions don't validate language. Actions do. Your goal isn't to feel like it's true right away. It's to use repetition until it becomes automatic. That's how you forge reality. Nothing becomes real until it becomes regular. This is where many give up. They try something new, but stop when it feels fake. But strength isn't formed through ease. It's built through friction. You don't become transformed by dipping your toe in clarity. You immerse your mindset until the fog clears. Every phrase you allow shapes your future energy. Imagine if every time you made a mistake, your next thought was, "This helps refine my process." Imagine if every setback was followed by, "I gain insight through this." Imagine if your reaction to difficulty was, "My adaptability is growing stronger." Those aren't just affirmations. They're neurochemical codes. Language creates mental momentum. What you say repeatedly will determine your tolerance for adversity, your appetite for opportunity, your ability to navigate complexity. The power isn't in the moment. It's in the accumulation. The question is not what you said once, but what you've been saying always. You're never just thinking, you're always programming. That means you can program breakthroughs by switching the vocabulary you run internally. You don't need better conditions. You need different instructions. Your system obeys the voice that speaks most often, not the one that's loudest temporarily. If you consistently tell yourself you're building discipline, you'll begin acting in alignment, even if you've never followed through before. If you tell yourself you're learning how to adapt quickly, you'll start spotting patterns that allow for smarter reactions. If you keep reminding yourself that discomfort is development, you'll stop retreating and start growing where others freeze. Remember, this statements become structure. If you want a new structure, you need new sentences. Stop waiting for the outside world to give you permission. Speak it before it happens. Language is the ground before the building. Lay it properly. You're not pretending you're someone else. You're uncovering who you were before discouragement added doubt. You're not tricking your system. You're teaching it. You're not fantasizing. You're forming a new base layer from which every step gains traction. People don't evolve by accident. They grow through rewiring, through recoding, through replacing one outdated mental program with something updated and empowering. You don't need more motivation to do this. You need structure around the words you allow to run through your head. You need boundaries around thought, filters, precision. The same way you protect your phone with security, you need to protect your mind from unfiltered input, especially when the voice tearing you down comes from within. You wouldn't accept abuse from others. Don't permit it from yourself. You have to start treating your internal space like sacred territory. The words you allow and determine what you give out. People wonder why they can't stay focused, why joy fades fast, why anxiety returns. It's often because their entire internal framework is built on low-grade, repeated programming. Until the code changes, the outcome can't. You must challenge lazy language with upgraded direction. Even when it feels unnatural, say the thing that serves your higher aim. You're not waiting for belief to show up. You're creating it one correction at a time. Speak like your destiny is listening, because it is. Every sentence is either reinforcing your legacy or weakening your direction. Nothing is neutral. Casual talk creates careless action, and careless action builds confusing outcomes. But intentional speech builds clear momentum. It strengthens the pathway between vision and reality. Every day you do this, you strengthen that bridge. You will hit walls. You will have doubts. But if your language is rooted in growth, you won't stop, you'll adapt. That's the difference between those who plateau and those who progress. One repeats limitation. The other installs permission. Permission to outgrow old labels. Permission to build beyond past errors. Permission to learn faster, heal deeper, act braver. That's what changing your core sentence structure does. It opens access to potential that was always there, just muted by poor instruction. So pause. Listen. What's the most frequent phrase your mind repeats when you're uncertain, exhausted, stretched? Whatever it is, that's the phrase building your future. And if you don't like the direction it's creating, don't blame motivation. Rebuild instruction. Your destiny doesn't begin when things go right. It begins when your inner language stops dragging you backwards. So now you know, the shift doesn't begin when everything outside you changes. It begins the moment you take full control of the language running within. One belief, one sentence, one correction at a time. That's how transformation is built. Because your future doesn't respond to fear. It responds to alignment. Not the kind that waits for perfect timing, but the kind that's created through intentional thought, clear direction, and repeated self-respect. You don't need to wait for a sign. You don't need to wait for someone to choose you. The permission you're looking for has always been inside you. You are the thought. You are the power. You are the pattern breaker. You are the author of the next chapter. And the moment you decide to speak like the person you're becoming, your entire life starts catching up. This is AlphaMotive Talks. We don't just motivate, we awaken. Fix the thought, speak the truth, and go become everything they said you couldn't.